Okay, welcome to the Band of Brothers podcast. I'm here today with an old friend, a guy I haven't seen in a lot of years, Dave Belt. How you doing, Dave?
Hey H, I'm doing fantastic. Much
Thanks.
better than I've been in the past, that's for sure.
That's good. That's
Yeah.
good. Thanks for being willing to come on and share your story with the guys on here. There could be guys in the ranch right now and residential. There could be guys in outpatient. There could be guys that have 5 years, 10 years, and people anywhere. So I'm grateful that you're willing to come in and share your story with people and give people some hope.
Yeah, thanks. I'm grateful to be here too. And um, you know, I was thinking up to this point of how I was going to share my story and what to share and getting
Mhm.
kind of nervous. And there's always, at least for me, I still struggle with the tendency to try to either build myself up because I want people to like me or um to let my ego get sort of in the way. And it's something I seem to have to constantly watch out for. And sharing your story is tricky because you want to say the right parts, and you want to help people by sharing your story. At least that's why I feel like I'm doing this. But it's hard to not feel somewhat special when you get asked to do something like this, right? Because you know I've listened to a lot of podcasts and a lot of different videos, and there's a lot of things I relate to from people in recovery. And there's been nights when I've been laying on my bed trying to fall asleep, and in the internet rabbit hole, and I'll stumble across somebody's story, and I've connected with that. And my hope for tonight is the same idea, that at least one person can take something from my story, because what I realize is all I have to do is share my experience and my kind of interpretation and what I've learned. And it's not my like role to sort of try to predict or analyze or how someone else might, go along their journey of recovery, because it's going to look probably different than mine. But um, yeah, that's just kind of like the little prelude, is that I just hope that somebody can get something good out of this.
That's awesome, dude. I'm sure they will. And again, thanks for being willing to come on and tell us your story. Let's just start at the beginning. Like how old were you when you took your first drink or put any mind altering substance in your body? How old were you?
Yeah, sure. I was 21 when I first did that, and the
21.
alcohol was
Wow.
my first. I know it's a bit older than usual, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
I grew up in Salt Lake City. I grew up strong LDS background, Latter-day Saint background, for anyone that might not understand that acronym, because I'll probably use it again. Um, and had a strong history of grandparents that served missions and cousins that served missions, and even relating to some pioneers and that kind of thing. And so the church has always been very important in our life. And I'm grateful that I had this really sort of, I think sheltered is a bit overused, but the idea is that I had a pretty safe, almost like upbringing bubble that was, I was really, content for the most part, other than some not feeling like super good in social situations. And like, I can remember at family events it being hard for me when all the cousins would be gathered. And um but I didn't really, I guess I didn't look for other substances, mostly because they weren't even on my radar. Like, I just had a really good group of scouts and young men's leaders, and church every week, and mutual every Wednesday, and
Yeah.
going to the temple, and all that stuff was my first 18 years. Then I'll tell you, I'm getting ready to go on my mission. I'm about 3 weeks away from going on my mission. And I get one of our church leaders said, "Do you want to go boating?" And of course, I want to go boating. Like, that's super fun. Go ride the jet skis and do the wakeboarding. And so there was a big ward group that went, and I went along with them. Well, our young men's leader had asked an old mission buddy of his to come because he had some jet skis. And I'm having a good time, and there's this guy named Mark that's his friend. And so he starts kind of looking at me. I noticed kind of differently and sort of a little bit touchy-feely, and basically, convinced me to stay after everyone else left because he had a couple jet skis. And now that I look at it, it was very much a predator situation that this guy had with me. And I ended up getting molested by this guy. I froze, like a deer in the headlights when things happened, and I was touched in places I shouldn't have been touched. And it really confused me. I remember at one point when he was driving me back down the canyon, and we stopped to get gas, and I thought, this is my chance to just like get out of the car and start running, because I was that like frightened of what might happen. And abuse can do some really terrible things to your mind, and it started to make me, I was really confused. And I woke my parents up that night and told them about it, like in the middle of the night.
Wow.
And because it was just on my mind and on my mind and on my mind. And I was like, I got to say something about this.
Yeah.
And pretty much, they were shocked, I think, too, because it's not like anything like this had ever taken place in our family.
How old were
And
you?
so I was 18. Well, I was probably 19. Yeah, I was 3 or 4 weeks away from leaving on my mission.
Wow.
And pretty much what happened, at least my view of it, is it pretty much got swept under the rug. Like, hey, he's ready to go on his mission. I remember getting a call from the bishop the next day, like, how are you? And I remember I wrote everything down in detail because I was like, I was like, in case this needs to go to court, like I want a record of it. And I remember the young men's guy named Brent that came over to my house the very next day and had heard about it and was apologizing. And I'm so sorry, Dave, this is never my intent. And
So this was the guy that molested you?
no, it was the guy that he was the young men's leader that invited his ex-mission buddy to the boating event.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. And he just felt terrible, and it was just weird. This guy was like trying to get me to come to his house later because he was like, I have some suits that you can have for your mission. And I'm just so glad it could have been worse. Let me just say that. Like it was mostly just inappropriate touching, and there was luckily nothing that really went on beyond that, but it was still an invasion, and it still really screwed with my head.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then to sort of just get like, hey, Dave, we're sorry this happened, but that was about the extent of it. I didn't go to see I didn't really discuss it much further than that. It was kind of just like caught up in the mission stuff. And so anyway, I don't know how much this relates to this incident, but I had a first really couple hard weeks on my mission, and it was in France, and had a lot of doors slammed in our face. And actually just after like 2 days, I had a couple bags of vitamins from the MTC. They're huge vitamins. If anyone remembers, we called them like horse pills because they were huge. And there were these big giant green vitamins. And I remember I was really in a mentally hard spot, and so I was so discouraged. Middle of the night on my mission in a 4-man apartment in France. And I don't know what came over me, but I just thought I'm going to just take a bunch of pills. And I remember just like shoving these pills in my mouth by the sink, and I'm spitting some of them up and grabbing them and like just shoving them into my mouth. And I swallowed about 20 or 30 of these pills. And then I was, of course, got super sick, and I told my mission companion, and then we had to call the mission home. And I was like, I want to go home. Like, this mission thing's not for me. And the reason why I tell that story, because that was the first time I at least tried to use something to change the way I felt. That's the importance there. And I really don't need to go a lot further on that story. I don't think so, at least, but just to realize that was the first time. I was luckily able to work through those challenges, and I ended up serving my mission, and things got better. Let's just say things got a lot better. It was really dark for a few days, but things got better. And I did have a struggle, but I gained a testimony on my mission of Joseph Smith and the Book of Mormon and beyond a doubt. And I felt God answering my prayers when I cried out because I was so discouraged. Like I knew that God wanted good things for me. So I get home from my mission and on Thanksgiving, and by Super Bowl Sunday was when I took my first drink of beer. And I was at a buddy of mine that I had grown up with. He didn't serve a mission, and we connected after I got home, and we were at a Super Bowl party. And I went to that party knowing that I wanted to rebel because I had this thought in my head of like, I want to go through a party phase. Like I've never really done much, and I want to figure out, I want to have some fun, right? And so partying seemed like fun, and I was going to be going to college that fall, and so I was like, let's try drinking. And I still remember that first beer. I didn't like the taste. It tasted like tasted like soggy Cheerios to me. But I remember the way it made me feel. And I was shy around girls, very, very much so. I hadn't really ever had a girlfriend, even at that point. Up to that point, I think I'd kissed one girl, and it was just a quick thing. So I knew nothing about how to really interact with girls, and was very self-conscious there. But when I was drinking, all of a sudden that came a lot more naturally. And
what did you think? What do you think it did to the feelings you had, or the negative feelings that you had, or like what did it get rid of? Fear? Did it get rid of anxiety? What did it get rid of the most for you?
Yeah, I think anxiety. I think just that it was like a ball of nerves that I didn't even know was really all the time going on in myself. I remember when I was a very little kid, 6 or 7 years of age. I think I've always struggled with self-esteem because I remember laying under the bed. We had bunk beds, me and my brother, and I wrote underneath on the bottom of the bunk bed on one of the little slats, I wrote David B is dumb. And so that and then later that that was found. And it's I think I just always struggled with like liking who I was, and I put on a good show to people. And I realize now that's what I was going back to about trying to build myself up, and I have to watch out for being conceited because it was almost like I spent so much time trying to like build myself up to try to get people to like me, when underneath I just really had a low self-esteem and self-worth of just not liking myself. So I woke up on my cousin's couch the next morning, and I, blacked out that night, and I felt terrible, hungover. But and then the lies had to start because my parents were like wondering why I hadn't come home, and I'd
Right.
thrown up on myself, and it was like that's when the lies started, and I really much I so remember, even though I felt really sick, I couldn't wait to do it again. And so it started just
Interesting.
kind of socially, like on weekends here and there when I could sneak away, and
Well,
that's how it started.
the brain logs that feeling. I mean, the first time I drank, I threw up as well, but I remembered that moment that it took away the hole in my gut. I remember, like, my
Mm,
brain logged it, like, okay, I got an answer, I got a solution. I don't know when I'm going to do it again because I was a little younger than you,
okay.
but man, if things get bad, I know where to turn to.
Totally relate to that. So I think, you hear alcohol is like used as like social lubricant or whatever for a long time. And that's how it was for me in the beginning, is just like occasionally when I could. I was not brave enough or bold enough to go buy it really on my own. So I had to be somewhere where I could get it.
Mhm.
And interestingly, I move away to SUU in Cedar City in the fall. And I start introducing myself to everyone as so my given name is David with a D, and I'm introducing myself to people as Davis with an S. And I thought that name's some of my high school friends for some reason had kind of sometimes called me that. Like, I don't know why, but like we just like would tweak a word or two of each other's names sometimes and kind of like it would stick. But looking back, I realized, well, why I did that is because I could reinvent Davis down in Cedar City David was this RM that was pretty straight arrowed, but Davis was like a new kind of like version of myself that I wanted to have that. And like I say, I thought I could just go through this rebellious phase, turn it off at some point, and kind of like, oh yeah, I always see myself in the temple, and kind of like the path that I saw a lot of my cousins on, right? And even my older brother on, because he got married pretty fast after his mission.
So Davis was your Mr. Hyde.
There you go. I never
Yeah.
heard it like that, but that's a yeah. Like are you talking about the Jekyll and Hyde
Dr.
story?
Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, yeah.
There it is. And so I remember I would get drunk at these parties and I would just like act so crazy. Like I would do handstands in the party, and I somehow developed this nickname called Dance and Disco Davis at these parties, because I would just sort of like, it would make me so loose, and I didn't really know how to dance. And I think that's why people thought it was funny, is because I would just sort of, move around and do these kind of funny moves, because I was so like relaxed and sort of happy and just sort of like into it, that I saw myself as sort of entertainment, when people were getting drunk. And so I really played that up a lot,
Mhm.
and tried the whole like bongs, the whole beer bongs. And I remember at our school, there was a thing called the Century Club, and what it was 100 shots of, or you'd had to take 100 shots of beer. So every minute you'd take a shot glass, right? And you'd have your beer, and you had to do one shot a minute for 100 minutes. So basically in an hour and a half, pretty much, you're doing 100 shots of beer, which doesn't sound like a whole lot, but it ends up being like 10 or 12 beers.
Yeah.
And I remember, like, not only did I go through that Century Club once, because once you hit it, but I had to do it twice, right? Because it's like, so looking back, that just tells me kind of like, that idea of like, I heard a sponsor once that would tell me this, and I related to it. He said, I used to drink to get drunk when I was drunk. And, I heard that and I was like, that's me, dude. I was drinking to pass out and get drunk every time. And I
Yeah.
had no off switch for drinking, dude. And I was always the one that was having to get carried home from parties, and I was throwing up in people's cars, and I was waking up not knowing what was going on. And so I'd wake up with this sort of, like embarrassment and shame of like what happened, and who did I talk to, and what did I say, and that kind of thing. And that went on for a long time, throughout college, and I still didn't really drink by myself until maybe my senior year.
Okay.
So first is drinking is fun. Then drinking is fun with a few problems. So this was the first time I ended up getting arrested and going to jail because of drinking.
Did you get a
We had
DUI or public intox or what? Fight?
what did they call it? Under the influence, I guess, with intent to distribute or something like that. What happened, long story short, but we had a roommate that was on the football team and he wanted steroids. And so me and my other friend, who was my best friend for 3 years there, because we drank and acted the same, he's the one that introduced me to pills too. So we drove to Mexico together to get pills and steroids. And I hadn't had any pills at this point, but I just would drink. But I went along with him, and basically, long story short, we came back through the border with a bunch of pills like Somas and Xanax and like stuff like that. I can't even remember, Roxy's or something. And he got on his Mustang, and then he hit a median and spun around because he was so drunk. And next thing I know, we both got booked and taken to downtown San Diego jail. And I had pills in my pocket and stuff. So I got charged with intent to distribute, and he got a DUI and stuff. And so,
This was the first time you'd ever taken a pill?
yeah, it was on this trip. It was on this trip. Yeah.
So
And
when
here
you
I am.
took the Roxy's, what did that do for you?
I didn't even know how it was going to mix with the alcohol and stuff. And I mean, I remember one of the things that we were back at our other friend that lived in California. Well, his friend, we were at his place swimming, and I forgot I had pills in my pocket and jumped in the pool. and ruined like half my stash that I just spent money on because they all got wet. And so then I tried to dry them out and put them in this like Cool Whip container, and it was this blue goo. And I was like, it was just crazy. I didn't know what I was doing, of course,
Yeah.
and he knew what he was doing and he knew the right amount to take and stuff, but he drank too much because the idea was that he had this whole system down. He would park in San Diego by the border and then walk across, buy stuff. And he went into the pharmacy and then he'd pay the pharmacist like 20 extra bucks. He would reseal it in a different jar. And then he would put it under in his pants, in his underwear and a sock. And then he would walk back across the border with the stuff. And he was like, this is a foolproof way to get stuff. And so then here I am, like, actually I did the same thing. And he like basically a mule for some pills across the border. Because again, I was like, this is cool. I'm living like this cool druggy life, like I'm like just trying to like go immediately from 0 to 60 into this life that I knew nothing about really other than drinking. And so I didn't really like pills a lot at first because I didn't know what they were going to make me feel like, but it was pretty soon that I realized I could get the same effect I got from drinking, but I could do it more secretly because no one's seeing me drink because I'm not buying alcohol on my own yet. But I can pop.
Doesn't smell.
Doesn't smell. You're right.
Doesn't take quite as long.
I can pop some with a glass of water and just sit on a couch and chill, or if I'm going to go to a party and talk to girls, like same idea, like I can get the same effect. And so that became my new favorite thing. Right. And then I'd been diagnosed with ADHD. So I actually had a Ritalin prescription that I didn't even, that helped me and I didn't actually abuse it. But I found out I could start trading with this guy, like some of my Ritalin for, pain meds. And I remember thinking, man, this is the best thing for me. Why in the world would this guy want these things? Right. And then later on in life, I switched to Adderall and then I started, got super hooked, and Adderall and alcohol are my two favorites. But anyway, I got a little ahead of myself. I was in downtown jail and I ended up having a bail of $25,000. I don't even know how this happened, but after like 3 days, we both got let out and it was on misdemeanors, and because it was my first offense and I think his too. And so we drove back to Cedar City. I'd missed class, a couple days of class. Our other buddy was like, because the steroids got taken, the pills got taken. Our roommate's pissed because he had spent all this money for us to get the steroids. It was just a bad experience. And that's the first time I had to go to AA because I was court ordered. And that's also the first time that I remember in San Diego jail that I said to God, if you get me out of this jail cell, I will never drink and do pills again.
So what are you, like 23, 24 right now?
Yeah, yep. And I really meant it at the time. I was like, this rebellious life is not for me. Like, I'm done with this. And that was that first like tearful cry, like to God, like, this is not what I want to do. And little did I know that there was going to be 14 more years of struggle, after that first prayer to God of get me out of this thing.
That was the old foxhole prayer.
There it is. That's right. Like, are you doing a war reference? Like, get me out of this foxhole?
Yeah, you get me out of this jam and I just promise I'll never do it again. Get me out of this one, I promise I'll never do it again. We've all had a lot of those that we never lived up to. I think God was always willing to live up to it. We just fell a little bit short.
Definitely.
So do you graduate from SUU?
I did, yeah. And I remember supposed to be one of the most important days of my life, my graduation day, and I'd gotten some pills and had them in my pocket. And I remember as I'm walking through with my cap and gown, right before we go under that tunnel, I popped the pills because I wanted to have that buzz going. It wasn't enough to just have the accomplishment of being the first in my family to get a college degree. I had to be high during it, right? And I remember the night before graduation, I got super drunk, and we were taking shots of tequila, and I don't know, I drank the worm, or I ate the worm, or whatever that's in these bottles of tequila, and I remember being so sick. And it was another one of those where, like, I'd wake up sick from alcohol a lot and be like, I'm done with this. and I'd maybe last 3, 4 days or a weekend or whatever. And by this point, by the time I graduated college, I was drinking more and more by myself. I remember the one and only time I ever did mushrooms, I did it by myself in my bedroom in college. And I remember watching TV because it made the TV look like an HD TV. This was back when the TVs were huge and weighed a lot, you know. But I found that strange because most people would tell me you do those kind of drugs with people and listen to music together, etc. But I was already starting into that phase of like isolation and not want, I would keep all my beer in a little fridge in my room and I wouldn't drink out. And even though both of my roommates drank, I wanted to drink basically, I was always embarrassing myself when I drank. And so I just isolated more and more so I could drink the way I wanted and not interact with people. That way I'm not saying dumb things that I shouldn't say. I'm not throwing up on anybody. And now I can just zone out and, and drink the way I want. And I always loved listening to music. And by this time, I'd also sort of developed this infatuation with like Jim Morrison and the Doors. And
Really?
Yeah, it was crazy.
I'm a huge fan of Morrison. I
Oh,
have
sweet.
2 of his poetry books, actually.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. In fact, I just watched The Doors about a month ago
You
on
did?
Netflix or somewhere. Yeah.
The movie with Val
Yeah.
Kilmer?
Yeah.
It's a good one, huh?
So you wanted to be a poet and a rock star?
Something like that. I idolized this guy. I was just like, yeah, he was the kind of hero that I had at the time.
He was an epic drinker and died epically at 27.
That's right.
Yeah. So when you
27.
drank, did you have trouble once you started drinking? What did you have trouble stopping? Like, I mean, in the moment that night, like, did you have moments where you're like, okay, you maybe promised somebody, maybe a family member, or maybe you had a girlfriend, and you're like, yeah, I'll be back at 8, or I'll be back at
Mm-hmm.
7. Then you start drinking at 3 or 4 or 5, and then 7 comes, and then 7:30. And back then, I'm assuming we're in the 90s here.
Yeah, I think
No
we
cell
are.
phones yet,
No, we're
right?
in the early 2000s because I graduated 2005 from
Oh,
Cedar
early
City.
2000s. Okay,
So I graduated high school in 96.
gotcha. Okay. So what did you feel that um,
Yes. Yes.
obsession, that phenomenon of craving, as the big book says?
I pretty much would drink and any commitment I had made or, you know, anything. I just had a memory flashback to the second DUI I ever got because it's exactly what you just described, where it was Valentine's Day. And now I'm living in Las Vegas, and I was supposed to. It was Valentine's Day, and I was supposed to go with my girlfriend to take a hike, and we were gonna go at like 12:30. And I woke up and started drinking at 6:30 a.m. And sat down which was what I almost always did when I drank, which I would play video games. So I start drinking at 6:30 a.m. and I'm playing video games. And of course, by about 10, I'm like, I do not want to go on this hike. And I texted her that like, hey, I'm running late, whatever, just try to play it off. I think by 2 o'clock, I finally was like, I got to get out of here. So I remember I jumped in the car, drove to the Orleans, because I was also gambling a lot at this point, and I had to go put a bet down at the Orleans sports bar. They gave me 2 beers because when I'd make a bet, if I was $50 or more, I could get 2 drink coupons. And so I grabbed the 2 Coronas with limes, and then I go back to my car and I put those both in the drink console, because I'm like, I got to pound these before I get with my girlfriend because I can't drink anymore once I'm with her. And we had tickets for a Vegas show that night as well.
So you were undercover as far as drinking around her.
Yeah, a lot. I really was.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's when I got pulled over on my way to her place. And I still remember that feeling sitting in the back of that Las Vegas cop car, and even in February, Vegas is hot. And I remember, so that was my second DUI. And I only went to jail for the night, and then I got out at like 5 in the morning the next morning. And she was pretty pissed, but it's hard because the timeline starts to get kind of fuzzy,
Yeah.
you know. But at this point, you can see
What
that it's
finally happened before you came into the ranch? What was the defining
oh
moment?
yeah,
What
the
was
first time I
the bottom or the moment of clarity or whatever you want to call it?
yeah, I'm glad we can touch on that a little. And before I forget, H, we got to talk a little bit of ranch lore because I got to ask you if a few of these things I remember are true or if they're just
Yeah,
fish stories from back in the day.
yeah, no
Because
doubt.
for our listeners, I came through the ranch the first time, I think in around 2007 or 2008.
It was 2006.
Oh, okay, 2006. Wow. See, like I say, the timeline's crazy, but the reason that prompted me into the ranch the first time was my first DUI. So quickly on that story, I got hungover the night before, and I was supposed to meet my parents for a family trip to Jackson Hole in Salt Lake, and I was supposed to drive there. But I got super drunk the night before, and to the point that I had left my car at Orleans. I didn't even remember how I got home. And I was like, I got to go get my car, but I'm not the kind of person to reach out and ask someone for a ride. So I remember I could only find one of my rollerblades, and I rollerbladed from my house off Jones and the 215 down to it was probably like 3 miles. And I rollerbladed on one rollerblade down to get my car, drove my car home. And then I was like, I need to go to the pool and try to wake up a little so I can make the long drive to Salt Lake because my whole family's like excited to go on this Jackson Hole. And they don't really know much of what's going on with me either. Like I pretty well hid this. I would go home and become like return missionary Dave, right? But when I'm in Vegas or Cedar City, I'm like the party guy. I'm very
You were David up north in Davis
yeah,
in
that's right.
Vegas.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Very much that Jekyll Hyde. You're exactly right on that. So anyways, I went to the pool and I bought some Xanax from my neighbor. And so I kind of got kind of like shook off the hangover. And I remember popping a few Xanax, getting in my car and starting the drive to Salt Lake. And I really don't remember much after I was at the pool to finally, my next real memory is waking up in the Mesquite hospital the next morning, and my parents are both there looking at me, and my arms all wrapped up, and like start to learn the details of the night before, and it turned out that I'd like basically on mile marker 8, which is right between, after from Mesquite to St. George, there's like that canyon area. And there's a little stretch before you go up that canyon. And on mile marker 8 there, I had, according to the police report, I swerved across 2 lanes of traffic and almost hit this police car. And I remember it said in the report, he had to take evasive action because I posed a substantial risk of imminent death to him. I remember that very cleanly. And so I ended up wrecking and rolling my car like 4 times, and woke up and had to go to surgery on my arm. Somehow I survived that wreck, just like injuries to my arm pretty much, which is a miracle by itself. Because if you saw the car was totaled. But anyway, I got a felony DUI charge from that. And I was just on that little strip of Arizona, so that it was all done through Arizona. And so I had to go to the Arizona courts. They gave me 30 days jail time, and I could get 2-for-1 served. So 15 days jail. And if I stayed good for 3 years on supervised probation, they would reduce the felony to a misdemeanor. That was my first huge wake up call, or well, I guess my second. And that's when I reached back out to my bishop in Salt Lake that I'd grown up with and said, I need help. And he's the one that connected me to the ranch. Okay. So I came into the ranch on paper, supervised probation, and I really was there. I knew I had a problem, but I was not there with the right heart at that time. So back in the days of the ranch, we're like the two old guys that are like back when I went to school, and
Yeah.
these newer guys think they have it rough. But if I remember right, didn't we used to do 90 days in the ranch?
It was 60 still.
Oh, it was 60. I've
And
been
then there was,
telling guys 90.
then there was aftercare. That was,
I thought it was 90 in-house and then there was aftercare. That's wrong, huh?
and I think it was, we were always 60. Yeah.
Okay, always 60. So
Yeah.
there's one fish story that I need to change.
Yeah.
How about, if I remember right, we couldn't have sugar. Is that right?
We were sugar-free and caffeine-free
Sugar-free, caffeine-free. But we could
uh,
have caffeine when we went out to meetings.
nicotine-free.
Nicotine-free. Is that right? We could have caffeine when we went to AA meetings?
No.
Or is that just when we would all sneak it in the back?
That was you guys just rationalizing that in the group. What happened was I went to a place in Wickenburg, Arizona called the Meadows, and it's one of the best treatment centers in the country. And I went there for a week, just a tune-up for myself. It was called Survivor Week. And it was an outpatient deal, and I was in their cafeteria and I was talking to their clinical director, and I'm like, hey, this is weird. Like, there's no sugar in here. I don't see any coffee. I don't see any nicotine. Like, I don't see people smoking out. And he said, no, it's not. It's, if you want to get sober, you've got to get rid of all the stuff that numbs you from getting the core issues. So I came back and told Steve and Chris, like, hey, guess what? We're going this and that. And, everybody thought we did it because it was, because of the LDS thing, and it had nothing to do with that. It was purely clinical by nature. And yeah, it was hard on guys. It was hard on staff.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think people could get sober without smoking. So I used to keep the cigarettes in my left drawer, and every hour the guys would come, and I'd only been off the smokes like 3 years, so it was like, but yeah, we were pretty, it was pretty hardcore.
It was pretty hardcore.
Yeah.
I also remember, here's another myth. I remember one of my first or second days, I was in the shower and all of a sudden a bucket of cold water came onto my head.
Yeah,
and then I heard someone say, welcome to the ranch.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you came in, I think, around Halloween. So
yeah,
we
that's
might have
about
had
right.
some snow up there. And sometimes the guys would, and I wasn't condoning it. I did not authorize the code red. I'll take that from a few good men. Yeah, there was a shower on the main floor, and they would go, hey, you got a shower down there the first week, and my office wasn't far from there, and I'd always hear the litany of profanity coming out of that bathroom.
Yes.
Dude. Yeah, that was real.
I think there were some good things from that. Number one, it kind of like sent a message like, don't take yourself too seriously here.
Yeah.
And then I liked how I was able to do it to the next guy. So you quickly got to take revenge on the next newest new guy.
Yes.
Okay, so my memory's correct on some of these things. And then wasn't there like a 3 strikes and you're out type of a thing?
Yeah, we were pretty,
that was pretty rough.
We changed that over the years. But it was, we wanted guys that were really motivated. But, I think all that produced back then sometimes were just guys lying and guys sticking up for each other and covering for each other. And as over the years, 8, 10, 12 years later, we really just went to a personal accountability log. We called it a PAL. And it's like, it's your life, it's your sobriety. And we rely on the community to hold each other accountable instead of this kind of rigid thing. So yeah, that was there, but it wasn't correct.
Yeah, well, I think it's,
I look back,
I think it's neat for the listeners to hear a little bit of the history of how the ranch came to be and realize that just like our lives, like there's some growing pains and some mistakes and learning and then changing and adapting. And, what I think was hard is I remember when I got 2 strikes and then I knew if I got my 3rd strike, I'd get kicked out. And for me, I was on paper and I didn't want to get kicked out because that was going to hurt my legal chances of getting it reduced to a misdemeanor. And I just remember the fear every day of like getting that third strike that kind of took away from like me focusing on, what I
Yeah.
should really.
Yeah. So what,
But
so you go through and you get out and what happens?
yeah, and I went to IOP and stuff, and I moved into sober living. I was your brother's sober living house, and but even then I was still trying to sort of put a face on, because just to show kind of the nature of the disease, I think is just that, like, I remember like getting pills and being high and like doing my chores in the sober living house, and then like standing up there at the ranch and getting a medal that I'd graduated. And it was such BS because like I'd gotten high several times, but
Yeah.
I wasn't going to rat on myself because like I needed to graduate, for the law and all that. But it's just kind of like I look back at that and I'm just sort of like, you know, I think I just wasn't ready, I hadn't had, even though like some bad things had happened to me, I guess my life wasn't a shit show yet to where,
Yeah.
you know, I think I thought I could still get away with it. But it's like, I'm only hurting myself, but it's like, I'm still like trying to like fool all these people that like, hey, I'm doing the deal.
Yep.
But I really wasn't. I didn't do honest step work.
So how
But
long, so you'd relapsed in aftercare?
yeah, I
Okay.
relapsed in aftercare, but played it off and graduated. So it was technically a medal that should have been given back. But I remember when they'd put your sobriety date on the medal, and then it wasn't long after that I actually did, like, well, it was long when I was out of aftercare that I remember finding myself up Mill Creek Canyon in my and I was driving, and I remember like one of my good friends from junior high and high school like had to come and like pick me up, and I was like passed out like by, like, that was lucky that I didn't get a DUI there. But that was like my first relapse where it was like pretty obvious. And then I remember even after that, I was like so committed to coming back that I remember I took that medal that we got from graduation and I took it to like an engraver, and I was like, I had him carve the new sobriety date on there because I was like, this date's not changing, this is the one,
Yeah.
and again, probably 10 more years of struggle even after that date. And that's just it.
So
It's
tell
like,
me about quick about that journey. Like are you constantly drinking? Or are you getting some clean time and then going out, or what was that
pretty,
like?
pretty much once I got some recovery in me, and had some meetings and all that, it's just like took away a lot of the fun of it, and
Yeah.
it didn't
Hard
work
to
as
drink
well.
and party when you got a head full of treatment.
There you go. But I still tried for years,
Yeah.
and it did get worse. I did get that third DUI back in Vegas, and I went through 3 times of trying to get my license back and paying the fines. And I remember when I got my second DUI and the lawyer had me sign this paper because he was able to reduce it to the charges of a first as long as I agreed to certain conditions. And one of those was that I wouldn't get another one or injure someone on another one, or it would be really bad for me, right? Type of thing. And I remember that same feeling again, like I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. And then, lo and behold, I ended up getting a third DUI, and almost like killed myself when I was waiting for trial because I figured I was going to go away to jail for like at least a year. And I had all this like just all these thoughts of the worst thing that could happen to me in prison or jail or whatever. And that was one of the lowest points in my life. And that was the other real low point that I remember, that tearful prayer again to God on my knees. Like,
Mhm.
this isn't how I want my life. And I remember saying to people like, this is my life we're talking about. It's not like I want to keep doing this, because people that didn't understand the disease would like, Dave, why can't you just like stop? Like, can't you see this is ruining your chances for a long-term girlfriend and a life, and you're having to struggle, and like, don't you see that this is just killing? And I remember doctors telling me like, you're really hurting yourself, because at this point, I'm really just drinking so much that I'm actually at this point I'm I'm soiling my bed sheets, right? Because I'm passed out to the point where, and I remember my solution there was just to get a waterproof mattress. It wasn't like, oh, I should probably drink less. You know what I mean? I'll just put this waterproof cover over my mattress, and
Oh man.
it's just crazy
I mean, that
the
makes perfect sense if you want to keep drinking.
right? Yeah, and I
Um,
remember this one time of stopping, and I was so depleted of energy and stuff. and I was pretty much living on mostly drinking, and that I remember even just trying vegetables, and my body soaked up those nutrients so bad because I knew it just craved like some actual sustenance. You know what I mean? Because I was
Mhm.
just pretty much, my diet was so much just Bud Light, and whiskey,
Mhm.
and it was just not a good way to live, right? And so maybe let's fast forward to the very
So
last
what
drink.
happened? What happened the night before you got sober the last time?
Yeah, that's a good story, man. So my sobriety date's June 30th, 2015. So we're looking at over 8 years, 8 years and 10 months. And what happened?
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. It's a God thing. As you just heard 40 minutes of my story, you look at a guy like me, and like I say, I'm not so special, but I've laid out enough evidence that anyone with any kind of direction could see that it was a problem for me and my life was unmanageable and I was powerless, right? And my last time I ever drank, I had the best job I'd ever had, which was a salaried position, and I was working at UVU. So I'd moved back home from Vegas after 10 years of being there. And I
Okay.
thought this was like my fresh beginning,
This
gonna
is 2015, you said?
yeah,
Okay.
2015. And I'm living in my dad's basement in the bedroom that I used to grew up in. So I'm like 37, no girlfriend. Like, do you know what I mean? I'm driving at least I had a car and a license again. I was proud of that.
Yeah.
But I'm like 37 back in the room that I grew up in as a teenager and had bunk beds in with my brother, and I'm just feeling like, and I'd at this point been to 2 treatments, including the ranch, the 3 DUIs, the 3 jail times, um, no meaningful relationships because I'd burned a lot of those. And I was just drinking alone and playing my PlayStation. And basically, that was the only thing I thought was giving me enjoyment, but it was really maybe 10 minutes of enjoyment. And then just like drinking to obliteration and struggling through a job. And, but since I had graduated, it had opened, doors for me that I still could have a pretty good job. But like I say, I was at the best job I'd have up to this point. I even had an office with a window, and I have a retirement plan, and I have a salaried position. And about 10 a.m., I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden I'm like thinking about this like meeting that's coming up in the afternoon that I didn't want to do. And so I just decided to leave that job completely. And I walked out of there, got in my car. This is down in Orem, and I drove up to Riverton, found a 7-Eleven, and I pulled in there and bought three tall cans. And then I drove into like a little kind of alley type way where there was kind of like some apartments, and I started just pounding these these beers.
Mhm.
And I think that, well, actually, I know that was my moment of clarity. Like, Dave, what the F are you doing, bro? Like, you're 3 DUIs and you're sitting here drinking cans again, and you're not at work right now, and it's the middle of the day. And then I ended up at a park close to where my dad's house is, and sat on a park bench, dude, and drank these beers in a brown bag, dude, on this park bench, just like that I used to play in when I was a kid. Left
Wow.
my car there, stumbled home to my parents' house. I remember sending a text to my family, and I just like right before I passed out, it was just like, I can't do this. And that was all it said, I can't do this. And then I passed out, and then I woke up at like 2 a.m. with that feeling again, and that headache and that dehydration, and oh my gosh, right? And I just left the job that was like the best job I had. And so within a week or so, like that job was gone, and I found myself, not unemployed. I was unemployed, and I'm trying to go to meetings, and I'm at an ARP meeting. And anyways, somebody in one of these meetings is like, maybe you should consider like going back into treatment. And oh, that, I thought about it for a while, and before I knew it, like later that day, somehow I was on the phone with Tyson, and he's like, dude, let's try outpatient to start and see how it goes. And like literally that night, like I was in outpatient with the guys.
Mhm.
I guess I just had enough willingness, and like that was it. Like, I can't do this. Like, and so I started back in outpatient, and now things started to work. Like, I got a sobriety coach. Jammer, for some of you that might know him.
Yeah.
And I was with a group of guys that we started connecting with each other on the phone and sending texts to each other. And I was just like, that's when I guess the band of brothers came together for me, because I
Mhm.
was not doing it myself. Um, and I was just sort of following the directions, and Jammer would tell me to do these things, and I was doing the steps out of the manual that they had, and I was also going through the ARP manual, and I just really gave it a good shot, and I was willing to move into sober living if that was what I needed
You
to
really
do.
use that manual?
I filled out everything in that ARP
I wrote
manual.
that thing, and I
No
thought
way.
every time I gave them to the
Hey.
outpatient centers, I'm like, they're never using this. I know they're just like, I thought it was like this token thing, so they
Dude,
just
it
hit me
helped
off their
me.
back.
It helped me, man. I seriously
But
answered every question in that book. I wrote at least something. If nothing else, it showed my willingness, even if sometimes what I was writing was total BS out of my brain. At least I was trying, like, it showed a
yeah,
willingness to God. Like, that's an actual action that I could do that shows God, like, hey, this guy really wants to get sober. Because I can tell you, and like, I'm going forward a little bit, but like, every single area of my life has been upgraded in the last eight years and 10 months. Within 13 months of me starting outpatient, believe it or not, I got married on my 13th month. Exactly on July 30th of 2016, I got married.
wow.
And my wife, one of our first dates was, she came to my graduation at IOP. She barely knew me, but we had talked a lot, and online. We chatted online a lot, and I don't know. God put this woman in my life, because ever since I met her, like, I don't have to. You know how we talked about the Jekyll Hyde thing?
Mhm.
I'm totally myself with her, and I'm not even. I don't even have the desire to wear a different mask with her. Like,
You killed Davis.
there it is. He's gone. Davis, you're right. Yeah, you're right. And symbolically, I killed Davis too, because I had this like book, and this was an ego thing, but this tells you how much of an ego driven guy I was. I actually had this hardbound book of report cards and certificates and everything that was like all the accomplishments of my life, right? A copy of the degree from SUU, a copy of the degree from UNLV. I had, like, anytime I got an award at work or at school, I even had my third grade report card in there. Okay. And I had all this in a hardbound book. And this book was, in a way, I actually thought, if I die, like, at least I have something in here that shows that I did something in this world. Like, I
Mhm.
remember that was part of the motivation of why I made this book. And it started with maybe a 3-page thing of me typing out, like, kind of like my little bit of like my feelings on alcoholism. But anyway, bottom line is that book was totally about ego. And then, so there was a day when I took that book and I burned that whole book, right?
Really?
Me, that was my metaphorically way of killing Davis, right? And killing the
Yeah.
ego. Like I don't have to like win people over now and try to like show my accomplishments to get to even if it's not winning people over, it's to win myself over. I think that was a lot of what it was. Because I love who I am today, man. I seriously, like, I have this awesome life.
Tell me
Um,
about your family.
yeah, so met my wife, and 3 weeks after we met, she found, well, yeah, found about 3 weeks into our relationship, we found out she was pregnant.
Wow.
So this was like instantly I knew like what I needed to do. And I asked her dad if I could marry her. And I drove her to California on Santa Monica Beach, and I asked her to marry me. And who would have thought? I mean, the odds were so against us, right? And
Mhm.
like I said, this was a God thing for sure, because this woman in my life, like, I'm myself with her, and I'm not trying to prove myself to her, and I'm comfortable with her, and I could hang out with her and not feel like I have to say something in the conversation. Like, you have to realize, I don't think I had ever had anyone in my life that I felt that comfortable with.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Um,
I
and
believe in angels and all most of, I mean, I don't see the celestial angels. I never have. Mine have all been human beings. And my wife's
love
one of
that.
them. Yeah.
I love that. And you know what? My wife doesn't fit the typical mold at all. Like she's not LDS. She doesn't believe in our church, but she allows me to how to the extent I want to, and
Mhm.
doesn't get in the way of my, and I'll tell you too, I'm 8 years sober. As far as the church standards, I'm 100% inactive. Like I don't go to church one bit, but
Mhm.
I still feel the strongest connection I've ever had to God.
That's
Um,
awesome.
and I feel, this church thing is a whole nother story, but I get a lot of social anxiety at church too. I remember leaving church once in opening prayer during the opening hymn and going to the gas station and getting beer and drinking it, and it was like one of those things where I kept trying to like, oh, I have to do it this way, I have to do it this way. And
Yeah.
it just wasn't working. And somehow I finally just kept coming back enough to where it finally, like, everything came together where it was just like the program is working. And I thought it had to look this way. And I
Mhm.
thought I thought I had to be a guy that was sponsoring guys, and I thought I had to be a guy that was going to church and temple worthy and all these things. And it's not the way it is, right? So my definition, my version of sobriety today is not what I envisioned I had to make it look like, which tells me that God's in charge of my life and it's going okay. And as long as I keep getting the results of sobriety, like I'm going to keep doing what I do, because I have my program today is very structured in certain ways, but it's also like loose in others, in that like I don't force myself into situations that I don't think I need to, and I don't force myself to sponsor guys when I'm like, I have a busy family life, and I work a lot, and I'm like
So
just trying to.
what are you doing? How are you staying sober? Tell everybody what your dailies are, what you do every week, or like what does Dave do to stay sober?
Yeah, I got into this groove where it just works, man, and I keep doing it. And every morning I say a prayer to God, and it's very simple. God, please keep me sober today. I can't keep myself sober. And that's pretty much my prayer. I had a lot of prayers that were going off and off, and I just like keep it simple that way, and it works for me, like, because it's my connection to God. I'm admitting I need help, and I'm asking him for help. And then I go and immediately, and well, as soon as I get some time, I go into my three things that I do not miss, no matter what, no matter where I am, no matter what's going on in my life. I don't miss these three things, no matter what. The first is that I do a chapter of the Book of Mormon. I have to, like that's so important to me. And whether it's spiritual scriptures of any sort, I have faith in the fact that these books are of God and they're spiritual, and I need to immerse myself in at least a chapter every day.
Yeah.
And so I do one chapter, and for me, the Book of Mormon works. So I just keep going over and over with the Book of Mormon. I'm not interested in the other stuff right now. Maybe down the road I will study
Yeah.
it. And then I move right into, I have to do some reading out of, something from Hazelton. So it's like either 24 hours a day or the meditations or day at a time, that kind of stuff. For
Okay.
whatever that day is, I have to read that and
So
think
the
about it for a sec.
daily thought meditation
Daily
thought.
thought.
Okay.
And then this one is powerful. This next one that I do is the gratitude. Three things I write down, and for me it works with my phone, but I write down three things I'm thankful for. And I always start it with, I'm thankful I'm alive and sober. That's my first one.
Mhm.
And then I list two other things, and I often repeat what I'm saying, but that's okay. I thought about this the other day. So I'm about 8 years sober, and as long as I can remember, I've been doing these dailies. But let's just say the
So you
first
do
year
them in the
was,
morning?
yeah, I do them in the morning. Let's
Cool.
just say
Okay.
the first year was kind of crazy, and let's just say we don't even count that. Let's just go with 7 years of my dailies, and I'm listing three things that I'm grateful for. So 365 days, right? And then we're talking about 7 years of three things. And so we're talking about like,
Over
I'm not,
7,000.
there you go.
Yeah.
And how could that not change my brain and change my whole attitude towards life? And especially if a third of those are that I'm thankful I'm alive and sober. Like
Yeah.
that's part of me, dude. Like I
Yeah.
am so thankful that I'm alive and sober. And it's amazing how that outlook can just reach so many other decisions I make,
Yeah.
and it guides me, right? And it helps me appreciate what's going on in my life, and it helps it so that these situations that come up, none of them are ever too big for me to handle, because I know that, like, bottom line is I'm grateful I'm sober. you know, and I'm grateful I'm alive and I'm not in prison. And I'm a dad and I'm a husband, and I'm grateful I get to enjoy the four seasons, and I'm grateful I have a driver's license and a car. I'm
Yeah.
grateful I have food and have water, and I'm grateful I have a job. I've been at the same job for coming up on 9 years in August. So
Wow.
like 2 months into sobriety, I got a new job, which was very scary because when I left my job, I didn't have another job lined up. And
Yeah.
it's pretty hard to get a job when you're not currently employed. But that's another situation where I went to LDS unemployment services and was willing to let someone else help me. And I went through their little program, and they have a little book that you go
Yeah.
through.
Yeah.
And they helped me write a resume, and they helped me job search, and they practiced interviewing techniques with me. And I got my butt to their meetings, even when I was like feeling like just being lazy and playing my PlayStation. I got up and I like did these actions, and it's like paid off for me in tenfold, you know. And so I've had the
Mhm.
same job almost 9 years, the same wife almost 9 years. She's never seen me drunk or high or on pills.
Awesome. How many kiddos?
We have two kids.
Two
We have
kids.
Easton 7 and Ray is 3, and they're the love and the joy of my life, 100%. Like I
Easton,
just
are you a baseball guy?
because of the bats, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, mostly my wife came up with the name, you know, and
It's a cool name.
I
I
like
like
it.
that.
Yeah, it works perfect for him. And Rhea means sunshine in my wife's country. She was born in India and adopted when she was 2 years old from an orphanage,
Um,
and
so how do you spell Rhea?
Reya.
Okay, my mom's name was Rhea,
Oh, cool. How did they?
which is Soteria in Greek. She's full Greek, and it meant Soteria is Rhea in English, and it means salvation.
Oh, awesome.
So I
Salvation.
love
I
that. I love that
love
name.
that too.
Yeah. So your little girl's name means what?
It means ray of sunshine
Wow.
or
There
hope.
you go.
Yeah, depending on the translation, but it's from her home country.
That's cool. So what's been the biggest thing you've had to overcome in sobriety this last 8 years? Coming up on 9, really, right? If you were 2015.
Yeah, well, aside from no drinks and no drugs, right?
Yeah.
That's the biggest.
Yeah.
Are you talking about normal
Just
situations?
something that's happened where normally you drink over it, so a death or this or the, whatever.
Mm,
Like
yeah,
what's been the biggest challenge or the biggest thing you've overcome where
that's a great
you
question.
really applied recovery and you went, no, I'm not using over this one. I'm not doing that.
Hmm, that's a great question. There's no real one situation that comes up because my life's been so good. I know it sounds sort of cliche, but like it's like those promises that come
Yeah,
true. Like it's a new freedom and a new happiness. And I haven't had any tragedy that's
yeah,
hit me. You know, I
yeah,
seriously am in a pretty locked in routine of like I work 6 days a week. I'm with my wife and kids, and I try to show up for things and
yeah.
do and I should say at the end of my day, I always before I go to bed, I just pray to God and say thanks for keeping me sober today. And
Nice.
like I say, no matter what, I can't think of any days that I've forgotten those things. Like that's how important they are to me. And
Yeah,
it might be super simple, but I remember I love this story in the Bible of a few different stories that I really love in the Bible. One of them is where I don't know all the details, but he held up like some kind of a staff or a rod or something. And if the
mhm.
people just looked at it, they would be saved. And a lot of them were too hard in their hearts to believe it. And it's too easy, you know. To me, the metaphor
They
there
didn't
is I
want them to
see.
look back at the city they just left, which I think was Babylon or it was God, Sodom or Gomorrah. I don't remember. And all they had to do, or they'd turn into salt or something.
Ooh, this is good.
Is that, I think that's,
There's a lot
but
of
that's true.
relate.
Like that was such a simple thing. Like just look here, right?
And that's how I see my dailies, you know, like
I
I feel
love
like
that.
I had to do the steps to get to where I'm at today because I had to clean up my past. I had to like learn certain things about the disease, and I had to like make amends to some people's, and a lot of that was all connected to like being able to put my faith in a higher power to run my life and to realize like that I'm not running it anymore. And um, so I had to like do those things to get to this point where it truly is the maintenance part right now, where it's like it's not cruise control, but it's kind of like it is in a way because it's like
Yeah.
I'm a new dude. Like I have a new heart in my chest, and I'm nothing like the guy that you would have met, like you know, even 10 years ago or whatever. it's just like, it's a true miracle, the change that's come over me.
Yeah. Well, I can tell, dude.
Oh
I
man,
haven't seen you in a while, but the light's shining out of you pretty bright on the other side.
I'm getting fired up just because like talking about this, and like, the spirit's just like kind of coming through me, because I feel like it needs to hit some guys that are struggling, that are maybe in a same situation where they're in the routine of like, I keep trying, but I keep relapsing, or keep
Yeah.
going to another rehab, and it's not working. And like, people always used to say in meetings, like, don't leave before the miracle happens, and like, I'd hear that and get so frustrated. And then
Yeah.
like, when is it going to be my turn, or I'd hear like, this is a spiritual program, you can't do it without God. And I'm like, that doesn't, I get it, but like, how do I do that? Right. And it's like, it just it never clicked or connected. And I guess I just came long enough to where everything like perfectly fit together. And like, I'm serious, man. Like, everything came together. Like, I got on the right med. Like, we didn't really go into that, but that's a big, I think that's important for me too, is like, I'm on some medications that the psychiatrist helped me with. And I like had to come off everything to get to like a baseline, and then meet with them. And then I also didn't mention like that I went to therapy for almost a solid year, like every Tuesday.
Awesome.
I also didn't mention that like there was 6 months in there of almost weekly meetings with my bishop at one point, like, it didn't just happen to me, right? Like, I didn't just stumble out of bed and get this life. Like, I've had to work at it.
Yeah.
But the key is like, all these things have added up to give me the life I have now, to where I don't feel like I have to work all that hard now, because I'm in this good place, right?
I'm glad you mentioned that because I think it's really critical for many of us. Mental health is the other side of our addiction, and it's important to do whatever we have to do, whether it's mental health, medications, meetings with whoever, accepting those angels that God puts in our
Mm.
lives, because He's created all these things. He created and inspired all these medications for us to take, and these people and these methodologies. And so I'm glad you're doing that, and I'm glad you mentioned that because heck, if we got to take one pill the rest of my life to feel okay and to feel peace, then who cares? Like diabetics don't say, well, I don't know if I want to take this insulin, today, and well, they die, and for
Exactly.
guys like us, if we drink, we die. If we use, we die, and so what would you give in memory, not memory, but your daughter's name, ray of sunshine, ray of hope. I love that. Like
Yes.
what would you say to anybody listening out there that to give them hope?
Well, I would plug a conference talk that I would give you some homework to go look up. And it's called Finding the Way Back. And it's by Richard G. Scott, that he gave in 1990, in April of 1990. It's called Finding the Way Back because, you know, first of all, I can just say, please read that general conference talk, because no talk has ever hit me as more powerfully than that talk did. Um, but as far as like, what would I say to someone that's struggling, is something that was said to me when I came into the ranch, an outpatient, and our boy Braxton, I remember out after the meeting standing out there with him, and and he said like, bro, we need you on this side of recovery. Like, we need you on this side. And that made me feel like so like, important in a good way, and special in a good way, not in an ego way of like, but like, hey, they need me to be part of this movement, or I
Yeah,
don't, maybe not movement, but like, I need to join this side, right? And I need to stay on this side because they need me on it. And we
yeah,
need each other. One of the things I love about Band of Brothers is like the term of Band of Brothers is kind of like, at least the way I understand it, it's kind of like, because these men were like, facing death, and they were basically in these situations of war where they could go at any moment. It made them become a stronger kinship with each other, and
mhm,
because they had to rely on each other, right? And they had to depend on each other. And it did that more than just like a natural friendship might, because there was so much at stake, like their literal lives were at stake. And I see that so much with us, that
yeah,
we need to stay together, because it's like, on my own. Like I'm not gonna make it. You know,
It's definitely a we program. Recovery's a we program. Yeah, the Band of Brothers kind of came together that way, and we stand back to back, and we don't leave anybody behind, and we fight the war together. And
yeah, I
you
love that.
know, so well, dude, thank you. First of all, I forgot what year that talk was.
Oh, it was April of 1990.
1990. Wow.
It's an old one. Finding the Way Back. Elder Richard G. Scott.
April in 1990. Okay, I'll remember that. Well, buddy, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story
My
and giving
pleasure.
people hope. And I don't think I've seen you in I don't know, like a long
Yeah,
time,
a long time, H.
like probably 15
For
years.
sure. For sure.
I didn't even know you were an outpatient when you were an outpatient.
Okay.
So, but it's just,
Well, thank
man,
you to
you just
you. I want to say one thing, H. Thank you so much to you because you know, you had a big part in starting the ranch and like in a roundabout way, like you doing that kind of like played such a huge part in my recovery story. And like, I wouldn't be here without the ranch. I know that 100%. So thank you as well to you, H, because all these fruits of my life in part can be traced back to the work that you and Chris and Steve did, you know, in starting the ranch back in the day.
well, thanks, buddy. We all know it's a God thing, but
That's
thank
right.
you for
That's
that.
right. You're
And
welcome.
you know, it's so great to see you, and so great to see you with a beautiful wife and family and kiddos. And I think you told me you're working Saturdays at the ranch now and helping guys out. So I told you, like, didn't I? It's like karma. Like everything
Yeah.
you did, you know, I always tell my kids that, like, everything you do to me, your kids are going to do to you. Well, everything you did in res, these guys are
Mm.
doing to you now.
That's awesome.
Anyway,
Yeah,
buddy,
man.
thank you for coming on and sharing your story. And
You're welcome.
I sure love you, man.
Love you too, man. And let's keep doing this thing one day at a time together.